This is TWiT.
China has been accused by the United States of trying to hack coronavirus research. And now multiple groups have come out to suggest that this is the case. Very pleased to be joined by Laura Hautala from CNET to talk to us about this and so much more. Welcome, Laura.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, we are happy to have you here. Let's get right into things. The first thing that I think most people will wonder, okay, so we hear China is being accused of hacking research. What kind of research? What is it that's being hacked into, or accused rather of being hacked into? What are they trying to gather?
Right. So and to be clear, the accusation is coming from a division of the Department of Homeland Security that is there to warn private sector groups about hacking threats, and the FBI as well. And what they're saying is, research related to vaccines, to treatment, to testing, that sort of thing is being sought after by hackers. And, they're trying to access it as well and potentially take it. And so, that's really vital information that could lead to the delivery of a vaccine or medical treatment for COVID-19.
Right. So is this the case that we know for a fact that research has been sort of accessed, or that there has been attempted access, and they're trying to figure out who is responsible? Or do we not even know for sure if there's hacking? It just appears that there may have been. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And as always, these warnings aren't always super specific. In fact, I would say that this warning was meant to more raise awareness among the research community and tell them to use good security practices. So, there's a whole long list of what is being identified by hackers, what they are trying to access, what they have accessed. So it's really unclear what on that list may have already been taken. But in terms of what the government wants researchers to know, they said, you should know that if your research gets in the news, that's going to potentially make it a target for hackers. That's going to bring it to the attention of people who might want to steal it. And so, that's a point in time for heightened awareness. But anyone in the research community, the government said, can just heighten their security practices and make sure that it's harder for hackers to access that information.
Now, that's interesting. So is part of the recommendation to just at the time when your research is published or that it gets out there in the news, then you should be doing your best to protect yourself by that point? Or is it the idea that maybe you don't want to have such publicity? What is the exact recommendation here?
They did not say not to seek publicity. And, I think that would be pretty hard ask in these times, because people are so thirsty for information about what is being done to potentially treat or vaccinate against this disease. So what they're telling people to do is, some of the real basic things, but that are a struggle for a lot of people. So keeping all your software updated, because that makes it harder for hackers to hack. When you have your software updated, that means all those known vulnerabilities that are out there are locked down and hackers can't use them to break into your systems. Also, just things like password security, having strong passwords and requiring things like two-factor authentication, which is when you have to, use a token or enter an extra code after your password to log in. Those are the kinds of things, as well as just sort of monitoring your systems to make sure somebody from an IP address really far away who doesn't really belong to your system isn't trying to access your data and your research.
Now, you mentioned the author of this first article, we're going to talk about your article up next, but Alfred Ng mentioned in his article that there's going to be more of an official kind of release of some further details around kind of what's happening with these hacks in particular.
Right.
Do we have any sense of what that deeper level of knowledge might actually be, and when we're going to find out more of this information?
So the government said they'll release that information in the coming days. And typically what that looks like is what in the cybersecurity community they call indicators of compromise. So they will give, file names, they will give IP addresses, they will give account names and things that are associated with the hacking groups they've identified. And that allows these research institutions to to scan their networks for activity that matches up with those actors. It's just kind of like, these are the calling cards of the people who we suspect are doing this activity. And so that's typically the kind of information that gets released when a hacking campaign like this is identified by the government.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I find it interesting as well that a lot of these encouragements are those that we make regularly for everyday people, turning on two-factor authentication, strong passwords, etc. So hopefully, if these practices are not already in place, these groups will work to make that a factor. I do want to move on to talk about an article that you have for CNET. Wi-Fi is a lifeline in the pandemic, and it's harder to get if you're homeless. And also charging your devices. Can you talk about sort of what sparked this article and a little bit about the conversation that you had regarding this concern?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was looking at some complaints to the FTC about how hard it was to deal with fraud in unemployment, which was a totally separate story. But it made me think, people are having trouble calling government agencies. They really have to get information online right now. And some people are really having a hard time getting online. I was talking to some librarians, and they were saying, typically people come into the library to charge their phones if they're homeless and also access Wi-Fi. And now they can't do that because libraries are closed. So what I found was that, people are having a much harder time keeping their devices charged right now. So that's problem number one. And then problem number two, of course, is just connecting to the internet. And I found there's, a lot of groups out there trying to help with this situation. In New York City, the libraries are leaving their Wi-Fi on so that essentially people can go outside the library and use the Wi-Fi there. There's an effort underway in the San Francisco Bay Area to get solar charging stations in place for people to charge their devices. And I think it's interesting because we don't always think about people who are homeless needing or using technology, but it's very typical for somebody who's homeless to have a device. Often they don't have a data plan and they might just be using Wi-Fi to kind of use it as a tablet. But it's really vital. And I talked to this group in Seattle where they have city-sanctioned tiny house villages, and they have electricity and they have Wi-Fi hotspots. And one thing they were able to do was research the stimulus check and figure out how everybody there who maybe receives some kind of disability or other government benefits can make sure that they get their stimulus checks. And they were able to do that on their own. They didn't need help from social services or anything. And so it really showed as an example of how when people have access to this kind of technology, they can really take care of themselves.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. I think that I almost want you to double down on this if you can just a little bit to explain, because I think that there is certainly a narrative out there that something like Wi-Fi connectivity or internet connectivity in some way is a bit of a luxury, and charging a device is a bit of a luxury. And it's my understanding, sort of the argument here or the suggestion here is that it is a necessity based on the way that folks have to be able to get help during this crisis, or frankly at any time. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. That's what I was finding homeless people that I spoke with, as well as social service workers and advocates saying. I spoke to one man who doesn't really use the internet, but he does have a phone. He lives in a tent in the Bay Area, and he uses his phone to keep in touch with the people who can't come out and see him anymore because of social distancing. And those are the folks that are helping him sign up for Social Security, helping him access his stimulus check. And those are things he needs, one, to get a portable phone charger, which is kind of his number one thing on his wish list right now, after getting a senior housing apartment. That's his other goal. And once he gets those payments, then he might be able to get off the streets. But he really needs his phone to stay in touch with those people and, his doctors.
Yeah. Now, is there a way that folks can help this cause directly? I mean, are there groups that are operating to either provide internet access or provide charging ability or provide mobile chargers that are specifically targeting this issue?
That's a really good question. There isn't like one umbrella group that's trying to get phone chargers out to folks, but I do know that it's a top goal of homeless services everywhere I spoke with. is trying to help people keep their devices running. So I would suggest getting in touch with your local homeless services. I think they're very much looking for assistance. One person I spoke with here said, she's hoping we're at Silicon Valley's door, and hopefully potential wealthy donors might be able to help out their neighbors and try and solve this problem.